The February 24th, 2020 Village of Lake Bluff's Board of Trustees meeting. Could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Ankman.
Here.
Trustee Dort.
Here.
Trustee Meyer.
Here.
Trustee Toll.
Here.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Okay, we have consideration of the minutes of the February 10th, 2020 Village Board meeting. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Dewart. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Ankerman, like you heard. Any corrections, additions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
At this point in time, we allow 15 minutes for anyone who would like to address the village board on any matter not listed on the agenda. We're asking everyone tonight to keep to 3 minutes. Thank you. Is anyone here would like to speak on something that is not on this evening's agenda? Okay, we'll move on then. All right, we have, I think I'd like to move ahead, if you can, Part A of your village administrator's report, if that's all right.
Sure.
And that is a presentation of the Congress for New Urbanism, Illinois chapter, third place. And I don't think it really means third place.
No, it doesn't.
Which I'm
So,
sorry. Yeah, it's first place and third place.
it's a blue ribbon. You're
whatever.
right, John. It's a blue ribbon.
Yeah, it's kind of two,
So,
Prairie,
Mike, you wanna-
and I understand that we are the only community with two third place awards.
that's
Prairie
right.
Espresso Wine Bar and Lake Bluff Brewery. And, sir, could you,
Sure.
let us know?
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight, and we're really honored I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of Congress for the Illinois chapter of the Congress for the New Urbanism. You've been heard of us. C&U is kind of what we go by, the handle. We are a nationwide, international planning, design, development, engineering organization, multidisciplinary nature. And what we really focus on is understanding how the quality of the built environment impacts everybody's lives. And then taking that knowledge and helping to work to build vibrant and thriving communities just like yours. So one of the programs we did in the last year was what we call a third place competition that was really organized by one of my colleagues on the board. And the third place, as you're just getting to, is a term that was developed by sociologist Ray Oldenburg. And what it's just meant to be is a place that hosts informal gatherings beyond home and work. So it's a place for civic life. It's some fancy term for saying, your local bar, restaurant, coffee shop, wherever it is that you are a regular, that life kind of happens in our communities. So we sponsored this competition, this third place competition, to kind of open source and just see what was out there, see what kind of places people were really impassioned by and believed in, and asked for online entries. And we had 2 amazing entries from your community. So Prairie Espresso Wine Bar, John Davis, right? Yeah. John Davis, and Mike Doneker, okay, with Lake Bluff Brewing. So you guys emerged pretty amazing for all the region-wide entries. We got these really fascinating submittals. So the competition was based on 2 major criteria, and I think this really speaks to the strength of your places. One, it had to have people connection. So how does your third place activate your community? And 2, place connection. How does your third place activate the public realm? And if I encourage everybody to go, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you're familiar with these places. But to go to thirdplacechampion.com, where we've kind of created to host these submissions, to actually see the profiles that were submitted. They're far more interesting and detailed than I could probably give them credit for right now in quick remarks. But really amazing kind of how you spoke to your places, your businesses, and the role they had and what you're doing. And the last thing I'd add, just I think noting from both submissions, was it's not just about the walls or the space that they occupy. It's the connectivity with other businesses and with other organizations in the community, I think, was probably really key in selecting these. So with that, I'll get out of the way just to say thank you guys, and happy to be here, and congratulations. So what
Yeah. I don't know if John or Mike, if you guys want to.
You have-
Yeah.
Actually, we had awards that they already sent to them, so I want they want some gift
So
cards. and
we've been
stuff.
trying to do this for various reasons. We haven't been able to put it together. This took place at the end of last year,
Yeah.
last calendar year, but just for timing reasons of availability from CNU folks or whatever, we couldn't do it. But it makes good timing here because it's Restaurant Week in the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff Chamber area, and both of these establishments obviously are a big part of that, certainly for Lake Bluff. And everybody knows that a good revolution or two started in a pub or at a coffee shop, you know, so always great places with great ideas and chatter. So we certainly appreciate all you guys do and appreciate the time and energy both of you guys put into it.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys are premier in our community, okay? You provide a service, a place for people to connect, to meet, and you guys are a very big part of making a very vibrant community for us. So thank you very much, really. Okay, let's move on. Thank you, sir. All right, we will get to the village finance report. We have the warrant report for February 16th through 29th, 2020. So we have expenditures of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $285,308.97 for February 16th through 29th. Do I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Meyer. Do I have a second?
Second.
And second by Mr. Toll. Do I have any comments or questions for the finance director? All righty, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ankerman. Aye. Trustee Dort.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Okay. We have the finance report for this month. I'm trying to find it on here. And could we have a synopsis of that, please?
Sure. So the January 2020 financial report, the sales tax revenue on a cash basis for FY20 through November is $2,040,953, which is 6.9% greater, or $132,228 for the same reporting period in fiscal year 2019. Home rule sales tax revenue on a cash basis for FY20 through November is $592,180, or 3% greater than the same reporting period in FY19, with an annual administrative fees totaling of $8,997.84. Building permit revenue for FY20 to date is $252,150, or $328,000 less than last fiscal year for the same period. And the May through January fiscal year 20 expenditures of $7,581,925 are $167,750 greater than the expenditures for the same period in the last fiscal year. And current expenditures are consistent with or less than budget.
Okay. Any questions?
We should pick up December holiday impact for sales next month report.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? All righty, all in favor of accepting the report?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now go down to the village administrator's reports. We've already done A, so B.
Thank you. What I'll do, since I think most of the people here tonight are interested in this item, I'll read this cover memo, which was something I usually don't do, but I think I'll do it and then turn it over to you, Madam President, if that's all right.
That's fine.
So in November and December of last year, the Plan Commission Zoning Board of Appeals conducted workshops regarding a proposed 20-unit condominium redevelopment of the former PNC Bank site at 120 East Granton Avenue, also known as Block 3 of the CBD. At the conclusion of the December workshop, the PCZBA requested that the village board initiate a process to eliminate the 2-story or 30-foot maximum restriction and its associated variation process attached to the planned mixed-use development tool. At its January 13th meeting, the village board voted to submit that application for a text amendment as requested. So last week, the PCCBA conducted that public hearing and considered 3 options. The first one was to do nothing, take no action, recommend the village board take no action with regard to amending the text amendment. Their second alternative they discussed was deleting the height limit application, the height limit applicable to the PMD and which would require a developer would still need to seek a modification, which is a different process than a zoning variation process, but still has to meet certain standards and address those adequately through that process to exceed any underlying zoning height restriction. So if CBD Block 3 currently has a 2-story, 30-foot limit, they would have to address that in terms of a modification and address those standards in that regard. Likewise, if a project spread across easterly onto the R4 district, they would have to address the 34 height foot limit that's associated with that zoning district for a lot of that size. Through that modification, again, not a variation process. And that ordinance as written was, that option rather is it is the same ordinance that the PCZBA recommended to this body to adopt back in 2016, which then the village board then added some changes that has been on the books since then. That's how it's reflected currently with the height limit restriction that's in place for the PMD tool as well as the associated variation process. The last option is really, it could be a multitude of options, but it's where this group could vote to determine that a different height limit was appropriate for that underlying zoning district, whatever you wanted to select. But we generally clump that as 1/3 final option. So after considerable public comment and discussion by the PCZBA, they ultimately voted 3-2 to recommend the village board take no action and leave the current height limitation and associated variation process in place. So those same alternatives that are laid out in this memorandum still are present for you all to consider and talk about and direct staff and village council accordingly.
Thank you. Before I ask for comments from our board, I'd like to know if there is anyone in the public sector out there that would like to speak to this. I would ask everybody to please, in part of fairness and to keep it consistent, 3 minutes apiece, please. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this? Okay.
Good evening, I'm Jean Nemi. I reside at 580 Evanston Avenue. I'm going to try not to repeat myself because I will assume, and tell me if inappropriately or incorrectly, that I'm assuming you all watched back the meeting that took place last week with the PCZBA board. I think there are two main points that I would just like to reiterate at this point. First being that, and unfortunately I'm sorry, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but one of the most well-spoken members of the board and consistent members of the board last week made the point that nothing has changed. And he reiterated what many of the concerned citizens of Lake Bluff has said, that nothing has changed since 2016. The only thing that has changed is that we have a new developer essentially proposing the same thing, except for bigger, than the alternative developer proposed in 2016. And I think the point that struck me the most with what he had said at last week's meeting was that just because the developer and the new owners of this property made a poor choice or didn't have an informed choice of how much they were paying for the property doesn't mean that we should be changing the height restrictions that you all put in back in 2016 and that your village and the majority of your community or many of your community agreed with, that it should be at consistent and stay at 30 feet. So what I guess my biggest point here is that what he had said was the fact that don't change it for them. Don't change it for a specific proposal. I understand that the PZZA board was very specific that we don't have a specific proposal yet on the docket, but don't change it just because it hasn't been developed in 3 years. Currently, we don't have a great site on there. It is an eyesore, as many of the board has said, as many of the community believes, but it's the same owners that are wanting to put a new developed condo site in there, and they're not keeping up the current property. If they go and put a huge 20-story condo building in there that's 4 times the size of what is there now, and it doesn't sell, are they not going to be required to keep it up? And so what he said was let the market right itself, bring someone in who pays what it's worth, and then can develop something that's within the current zoning that you guys all put forth. The second thing I'd say is we were limited to 3 minutes. We're limited again. I hope that you read the recommendation and the feelings, the very strong feelings of the Lake Bluff community, that 3 stories would change the look and the feel of the town. The last thing I'll say, because I'm sure I'm over my 3 minutes again, is that we do have a petition of over 500 people. And there was some, Drew had reached out to me today to say that there was some concern about the validity of the people signing up, and I'd like to explain about how change.org works. Change.org is a place where you can create petitions rather easily and send them out to your community. It is IP-based, so when you sign up, it pulls your IP address from where you are. So for example, when I signed up, it said Chicago, Illinois. My office is in Chicago, that's where I did it from. Lee Neisted, who you're all very familiar with, was at his home in Aruba. It showed Aruba. So I want to make sure that you guys know that there is validity in the numbers that we have, and we went through and we confirmed almost all of them, that they were, if it said Lake Forest, it was someone that was at their office or was on their mobile phone. So I wanted to make sure that you realize that that the petition is absolutely valid in the numbers that we have. Thank you.
Does anyone else like to speak this evening?
Good evening. Rick Lesser. I live at 327 West Hawthorne Court. I'm not a neighbor of this property, but I do want to speak up in favor of maintaining zoning standards and maintaining restrictions such as the 30-foot restriction that the board put on this property 3 years ago. It is, zoning and height restrictions are there to protect the interests of the existing residents. And it is very important because the people who are there, who live there, have already bought, they're already established. They cannot easily just move on or cancel. They have their homes there, they have their families there. And these restrictions are there to protect their interests because they have acquired and are committed. I would encourage this board to maintain our zoning standards and maintain this height restriction in order to preserve harmony within the neighborhood. Thank you.
Sir?
Jim Arnold. I live at 204 West Scranton. I'm in favor of developing Block 3 at a 2-story limit. And my thought is, and I actually got this idea from Kathy quite a while ago, that Lake Bluff doesn't have much in the way of apartments or condos for people who want to downsize. Maybe a spouse has passed, kids are gone, house is too big, whatever, but they want to stay in the village. And 2-story would work. And because, you know, from looking at this current proposal, the cheapest condo was $750,000. And that's going to be beyond the range of many people as they get older, whatever. But anyway, that's my thought. Since you've already decided that I can't use the PNC Bank building for a marijuana dispensary, we might as well tear it down.
Okay, would anyone else care to speak?
I'd like to. Thank you. Rob Isham, I live at 134 East North Avenue. I haven't been able to attend these meetings because of my work schedule, but I just wanted to second the emotions of the folks who have spoken before, who supported the zoning commission's ruling last week. I think you should listen to the people who are most affected, which is that group behind us on North Avenue, and really listen to them who are not opposed to development as long as it's not too high and not too large. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Brad Anderson, 511 East Prospect. The only comment I'd like to make tonight is that I'd really like the discussion to be framed around the reason we're here. On December 18th, Commissioner Murray at the PCZBA told everybody that he didn't feel as though the PCZBA could comment on a petition coming forward without an endorsement by the village that they would at least consider something above the current regulations. This isn't about the building that was discussed back then. It's about not drawing a line in the sand and saying the village will not even consider or look at another proposal. And in the, as far as the possibility of economic development is concerned, I don't see how the village can just write off any possible future development in excess of 30 feet, which frankly was reduced by the village board after that development had withdrawn. So that's all I'd ask. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. Mark Stolzenberg, 16 East North. A few brief thoughts. Let's be honest about why we're here. The developer and the landowners are asking you to solve their math problem. They're asking for a larger, denser development so they can make more money. That's not a legitimate reason to change the zoning, and in turn, affect numerous blocks of homes and change the character of our town. The village board established the 30-foot, two-story limitation in 2016 to reflect the nature and character of our village. It was a bargain with the community. Give developers some more room to move, while preserving the small-town charm of our community and protecting residents near blocks 1, 2, and 3 who are affected by large developments. And indeed, Paul Bergman's presentation to the PCZBA, which if you haven't seen, I commend your attention, was literally an exposition as to how Lake Bluff was designed to be a two-story town. He should know. His dad designed it. It's not the village's role to create an entirely new market by changing the nature of our community and upzoning a swath of town in response to the profit demands of developers. Let the market work the way it is, with the existing height restrictions and variation procedure. Sooner or later, the supply and demand curves will meet. The market will clear under the existing restrictions. Some people may not like the price they get for the property, but that's how markets work. If we don't want to wait for the market to do its work, there's an alternative. Our strategic plan had a lot to say about parking in the central business district. The village can acquire Block 3, whether through a market transaction or through the eminent domain process. It can demolish or refurbish the bank building, rehabilitate some or all of the parking lots for CBD parking, which is desperately needed, and create open spaces for the public, including preservation of the stand of trees along Evanston Avenue. Those public amenities are a win for everyone. Thank you for your service.
Hi, everybody. Kate Breon, 610 Lincoln Avenue. So I put this together. You may have seen the PCZBA presentation I did. This is just a little bit different. So generally speaking, there are reasons that a village would look to amend an ordinance. If there was a drafting defect or a flaw, which I don't believe there is, if the ordinance is out of date, which it is not, or if circumstances have changed that would warrant amending the ordinance. So for example, if the negative impact of 3 stories on the people on North Avenue or on Evanston or across the street on Scranton would have changed, which they have not. We've also heard that the height restriction has kept buyers and developers away. At the PCZBA meeting on Wednesday night, one of the commissioners said if there was interest in building 2 stories, we would have seen it. We've also heard no one builds 2-story buildings anymore, which we know not to be true, because if you look at your packet, there, I believe, are 57 2-story units that have been built in the last few years in the Chicagoland area. And of course, the last one is that the property is vacant, which seems to be an issue. And it looks like if the 30-foot height restriction stays in place, people believe that it'll stay that way. And I'd like to pick up on the vacant nature of the property, because we haven't really asked why it's vacant. Mark alluded to supply and demand. We have to look at this as a commercial property. Supply and demand for commercial property is a little different than residential. It's very likely that the property is overpriced and the market's responding accordingly. All of us who own property in the village are aware of that. And the property isn't being marketed well or to the right audience. And in that case, I'm thinking of specifically the bank. So as someone who grew up in a household of a real estate professional who marketed property across the globe, the question you have to ask is to whom are the owners marketing the property? So I've been looking on the website of this company since this all began several months ago. And if you look all the way down at the bottom, you'll see there's one result for Lake Bluff. It's on Waukegan Road. So if you're not online, you're not anywhere. So as far as I can tell, over the last 3, 4, 5 months, this hasn't been visible on their website. I can't speak to why, but I do know that if you're not online, you're nowhere. So we're here because there is, in fact, a proposal waiting in the wings, and we all know that. And at the meeting on Wednesday, and I'm not targeting anybody, I'm simply pointing out that Mr. Anderson said, in essence, if there was not support for a text amendment, that the developer would pull the proposal. So that is a fact, and that seems to be the genesis for this conversation. But let's keep in mind that Block 3 is part of a larger plan. It's part of a future redevelopment plan, and it's got to be considered along with Block 2. They work in conjunction with each other, which we know because of the visioning study that TESCA did in 2015. You can see that both Blocks 2 and 3 were done in conjunction with one another. So if you change this, you're changing it with the forward look to Block 2. Let's not kid ourselves. This isn't just about Block 3. Here's concept A. All of these are 3 stories tall.
Kate, I don't mean to, and I'm not trying to be rude, but we're
I
on
know.
the 3 minutes.
Okay, so here's Block 2 today. This could be Block 2 tomorrow. But the text amendment's bad policy because you're making decisions based on ultimatums from developers, perhaps because of property owners' inexperience or desire to get more money than it's worth. But most of all, constituents, not consultants, should have influence on your decisions. And this is just what Mark said. Parking, parking, parking. It's there, and it's for the taking, literally. So what we're asking you to do is keep Lake Bluff a small town. It's a 2-story town, and that's the way we want it to stay. Thanks.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Okay. Hearing none, I will turn it over to the trustees for comments.
Well, I'd be happy to go first. On Block 3, what we currently have is an eyesore that has long outlived its utility, which means we also have an opportunity for something that is better. Now, that needs to be consistent with our duty to protect the character of the village, respect the interests of all of our citizens, and help shepherd the village's productive economic future. From my point of view, we do need the ability to consider any and all viable plans for redevelopment, and to do that in an open and fair forum in which all viewpoints are heard before we make a thoughtful decision. Now, I have no view on any new proposal because no new proposal has been presented to this body. When and if it is, we must reserve the right to say no to anything and everything if that's in the best interest of Lake Bluff. But I would like to find a path where we can hear proposals to learn whether there is something that this community should say yes to. Now, I respect the concerns of the neighbors who believe that certain developments will adversely impact them. They and their concerns have been heard and will continue to be heard. And I also respect, however, the concerns of property owners and others who wish to find a viable plan to redevelop the property. They and their ideas need to be heard too. And they're not being heard by this body, which is the challenge and the problem that I have. What I'd like to see is a way that we facilitate a civil and open forum where we consider ideas and issues and alternatives and come to a thoughtful decision after all viewpoints are heard. And I'd like to find a procedural way, that we can facilitate that process, hear this and any other ideas that the market brings to us for redevelopment, pro, con, and everything in between. Now, I reiterate what I'm saying here is not and should not be taken as an endorsement of any plan of any character or any dimension. But what I'd like to see is for us to find a path where this board can hear the ideas and for the public process to continue. So let's find a procedural path where we can do that.
I'll continue because my feeling is similar to Trustee Myers. The last meeting, I did state that, that my vote at that meeting and my vote tonight, and as well as this board, is not an endorsement of any project. Though I did at the last meeting go farther and say that I don't believe that a 3-story project is appropriate for Block 3. But at the same time, I also don't want to limit the possibility of a creative solution that might not quite fit into that 30-foot restriction. So I'd like to continue any process. I'd like to hear from any developer with their ideas, but at the same time, we can always say no to whatever specific project they propose.
Okay, thank you. Over here?
As I stated at the last meeting, very succinctly, tonight I would like to say that I'd like to find an open and flexible environment for us to consider alternatives. And as my colleagues have mentioned thus far, that isn't based on any specific proposal. It's merely to continue the process of discussion and dialogue with potential developers. I'm hopeful that there is a solution that addresses this from an arbitrary number. Hopefully we find something that addresses this from a functional standpoint as well. And I think over the last 3 or 4 years, during the course of this process, we've talked about a number of characteristics that would be desirable or not desirable about any structure that would be erected on that plot. So,
I too am interested in having dialogue and furthering the conversation. I would like to feel that we're open-minded enough to listen and to not be moving out of fear. I think that we've seen a number of proposals, and we may see many more. But I'm not afraid of having the conversation, and I would love to have the freedom to have the conversation and to understand that that we're not approving anything by saying we want to talk about it. We want to ask questions. We want to collaborate. We want to make known the things that we value. I highly value green spaces and maybe we need to be able to incorporate that more. That would be something that I think would really add value to however that space is developed. But I'm one person on the board, and the board hasn't been shown a project that somebody is putting forth for us to say yes or no to. I too have concerns about the scale, and I would like to see something that really fits the space beautifully and melds the business district all the way down to the residential homes that will be on all sides of it. I don't think we've seen the final version of anything, and I'd just like the conversation to continue.
We have two trustees this evening who are not here, but both have expressed their opinions. Regis Charlot has pretty much stated the exact same thing that everyone else here has said. He's not in favor or not in unfavor of anything. He would like the discussion to continue and things to be looked at as a whole. I also have a thing from Joy Marquis, who is home ill this evening. Thank you to everyone who has commented either in meetings or via email on this topic. Our community is stronger and better for your continued input, and this is clearly a topic that deserves much conversation. After watching the February 19th PCZBA board meeting, I am inclined to agree with Commissioners Danley and Ryder Porter. At this point, I have no opinion on the potential project on Block 3, but I do feel that as a village and as a community, we should be open to assessing different projects that could occupy this space. I view an updated PMD as a more flexible tool which will allow us to evaluate projects and work with residents and developers to determine the right use for Block 3. So with that consensus of this board, unless I hear differently from you all, I will direct the administration to come up with an ordinance that would take off the amendment that was put in 2016, that restriction.
Just for clarity's sake, then, that's, of those alternatives listed in the memorandum and discussed earlier, it's that item 2.
Correct.
Right.
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, just want to make clear.
That's how I'm interpreting what
Yes.
everyone has said.
Okay.
So
We can
if,
bring-
what that means then is that if somebody wanted to go higher than 30 feet, which is the underlying zoning, then it would require the modification, which is subject to the board's approval or disapproval.
They still have to address, one, it's a different height for the eastern and western sides, right?
Oh,
The
because
west
they're
side is
different
30
zoning,
feet.
right.
The R4 is 34.
34, okay.
But any PMD is a special use permit, so they would have to address the special use permit standards. In addition to, if they're seeking any deviations from any restriction, setback, otherwise, they would have to address the modification standards in the PMD tool.
So we have not given someone carte blanche to build what they want. We've
No.
Right,
The underlying height restrictions still exist.
right.
The PMD tool is that a zoning tool available that allows for a process different than what's on the books today, which is the variation process in the PMD tool.
So we're very,
Peter, if I missed anything?
so we're very clear, Drew, I have the ability, like any other trustee here, to say no to whatever is brought forth.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay?
Just, and if, with this tool in place, if a developer chooses to elect to develop the property using this instrument, they would submit an application to do so. Again, obviously, the board still has to vote on this, right, to change the rules. But that process would have to go through hearings at the Plan Commission Zoning Board of Appeal level, have recommendations, and you all would have to vote based off a recommendation from that body.
Is everybody clear on that?
Yes.
Okay.
So this comes back to you as an ordinance, which will require 2 readings for approval.
Okay. All right, we will now move on to the village. Do you have anything else in your report?
No.
Okay. Village attorney's report.
No report tonight.
Village president's report. I don't have a report tonight either. We have acceptance of the correspondence. I'll wait till everybody leaves here. Okay, we have acceptance of the correspondence, which was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees, and the informational reports on February 7th and 14th. Do I have a motion, please, to accept?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Meyer. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have a resolution establishing the regular meeting dates and committee of the whole meeting dates for the Board of Trustees for fiscal year 2020, 2021. Do I have a motion for adoption?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Ankerman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Toll. Illinois statutes require the village board to provide notice of the regular scheduled meetings. In keeping with past practice, the proposed schedule establishes the regular meeting of the village board. Scheduled start time 7 p.m. on the second and fourth Monday of each month. Additionally, the proposed schedule also includes committee of the whole CAL meeting dates, scheduled start time of 6 p.m. for the same night as the regular meetings of the village board. Please note the attached meeting schedule includes only one meeting for May due to the Memorial Day holiday, and December, which the last meeting has usually been canceled to proximity to the holiday season. As previously discussed, staff will continue to hold significant CAL meetings in the Public Safety Building room and provide cancellation notice in the event there is a lack of business for upcoming meetings. Any questions and things about this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have number 12 on the agenda, which is a resolution appointing as village attorney and approving an engagement. Is that a social engagement? A letter of engagement with Peter N. Friedman and L. Rod Friedman LLP to provide legal services. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Dewart, and there was a second by Mr. Meyer. Okay, in accordance with the Lake Bluff Municipal Code, the village attorney is appointed by the village president by and with the approval of the majority of the Board of Trustees. The duties of the village attorney include, without limitations, the following: provide advice to the village president, Board of Trustees, committees thereof, the village administrator, and offices of the village on legal questions, attend all regular meetings of the Board of Trustees, render legal opinions on questions submitted, draft ordinances and legal documents on behalf of the village, appear for and defend the village in all suits at law or in chancellery to which it may be a party, and perform such other duties on behalf of the village as pertain to the office. As described in the attached memorandum, Peter Friedman and the rest of the attorneys in the Holland Knight Real Estate Group in Chicago have started their own law firm and look to continue providing counsel to the village. Execution of the letter of engagement will confirm Mr. Friedman and L. Rod Friedman LLP as village attorney, and that the full scope of legal services as outlined above will be provided. Are there any comments or questions from the trustees?
Comment of congratulations.
Thank you, Bill.
Yes, we're very pleased to continue, Peter, with you and your new firm,
Thank you.
and thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, but this is going to be a voice vote, I believe, or this is a
Do a roll call.
roll call, I think, because of finances involved. May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Dewart.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
We have item number 13, which is a resolution authorizing the execution of a construction contract with Hoare Construction and waiver of competitive bids for the Village of Lake Bluff 2020 sanitary sewer lining project. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Toll. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dewart. The FY 2020 budget includes $165,000 to reduce inflow and infiltration into the sanitary sewers that are tributary to the intersection of Moffett Road and East Witchwood Lane. The sanitary sewers in this area were televised in 2019, and the report from the televising recommended lining several sewer segments within this sewer shed. The Illinois Municipal Partnering Initiative has regularly secured bids for sanitary sewer lining work, most recently for the village of Mundelein and the cities of Lake Forest and Highland Park, with the low bidder being Hoare Construction of Goodfield, Illinois. Due to the last MPI bid, pricing being from 2019, Hoare Construction requested an increase in the unit prices from the 2000 rates of 2.2%. Upon review of the bid and the requested 2.2 increase, the village engineer believes it to be in the best interest of the village to piggyback on the procurement and enter into a contract with Hoare Construction for sewer lining. It is believed this will allow for the completion of the project at a lower cost than by village bidding out the project separately. Section 7 of the village's purchasing policies and procedure manuals provide the village the ability to enter into construction contracts using cooperative purchasing arrangements such as the MPI, which is Municipal Partnering Initiative. However, due to the 2.2 increase in pricing from the 2019 MPI costs, the village board will also need to formally waive the competitive bidding process to award the contract to Hoare Construction. The village engineer recommends the village board waive the competitive bidding requirements in accordance with section 4.5 of the Village of Lake Bluff Purchasing Policies and Procedure Manuals and awards a construction contract to Hoare Construction in the amount of $112,136.20. The remaining budget is expected to be spent on sewer repairs in an area where the current condition of the sewer does not allow it to be lined. Are there any questions of the, for the village engineer or for the administration for this? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
Trustee Ankman.
Aye.
Trustee Dewar.
Aye.
An ordinance amending the Lake Bluff zoning regulations and the Lake Bluff Municipal Code to extend the short-term rental regulations for an additional year. This would be first reading approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Meyer, and a second.
Second.
A second by Mr. Dewar. Following extensive public comment and engagement, the village board adopted a 2-year pilot program authorizing short-term rentals in the village's residential areas subject to licensure, inspection, and various other regulations. The pilot program is set to expire on April 23rd, 2020. On January 27th, 2020, the village's board committee of the whole reviewed the pilot program. And at the conclusion of its discussion, the consensus of the village board was to maintain the status quo and extend the pilot program by an additional year in order to gather more information. Because the pilot program's sunset date is codified in the zoning regulations, increasing the length of the pilot program requires a public hearing and recommendations by the PCZBA. The PCZBA conducted its public hearing on Wednesday, February 19th, and unanimously recommended approval of the attached ordinance, which would extend the pilot program by 1 year. Any comments or questions?
If I may just offer one, there was 2 PCZBA members that were discussing the idea of revisiting the driveway requirement, the separation requirement. Ultimately, they voted as they voted there and didn't have that as part of the conversation, but there was an interest in revisiting that topic certainly a year from now, but that was the comment that was made. There was discussion about that particular regulation.
Okay. Anything here from board members?
I'll just make a quick statement in that I have been opposed to any short-term rental activity from basically the start of this conversation, and there were multiple reasons, which I don't need to restate tonight unless any of you would like to hear them. We've had limited data, no complaints, but principally I still remain opposed to allowing short-term rentals in the village. I wouldn't want one operating next to me, and for many of the young families that I've spoken with, they agree with that. And I believe I need to represent their interests as well, so I will vote no tonight to extending the pilot.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I voted no before, but I'm in favor of gathering more information because I think we really don't have much.
Okay. Over here?
No further comment.
Okay.
I continue to not support the idea of short-term rentals. I'm not in support of extending this to gather more information. I place the peaceful and quiet enjoyment of my property at the top of the reason list why I don't support it.
Okay. All right, so I think we now have a, we was going to do here a voice vote, and I think we'll do a roll call vote on this one.
This is first reading, so.
First reading, what?
It just needs a majority of those here to pass on first reading. On final reading, it will require 4 total votes.
Okay. All right, it seems to be tied.
Let's do the vote.
Right. That's why I said I would like to do the vote. Roll call, please.
Trustee Toll.
Nay.
Trustee Ankman.
Nay.
Trustee Dewart.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Okay, so that does a voice vote, and I will vote aye also to continue it to second reading. All right. We now have trustees' report. The trustees have anything they would like to speak on this evening? Hearing none, I would like to propose that we go into executive session to consider,
Threatened litigation,
what?
threatened litigation.
Threatened litigation,
And, property acquisition.
property acquisition. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Dewart, and second, was that Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Meyer,
It's Toll.
okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was it Mr.
sorry.
Toll?
Well, he moved it.
Oh, whatever. I'm sorry.
Just need to
Let's
get
not
in
fight
this-
over it.
We just need to get in
I
session.
put Toll and Meyer.
All right, okay, so all in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call, something's good.
Trustee Ankman.
Aye.
Trustee Dewart.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Toll.
Aye.
So who did you give that to in terms of?
Toll.
Okay.
Then Meyer.
Thank you.
They were louder.
All right, well,
But I did miss on 13.
we'll have an STR vote when everybody's here.